Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Um, it just seems like we're in a world where just bad news after bad news. I mean, you watch the news and it was always geared towards trying to get people to watch because there's just one bad thing after another happening. But I have to say, what's coming out of this government, which the government that we supposedly elect and supposedly is supposed to be working for us, is delivering nothing but terrible news for a lot of Americans. Now, yes, are there people celebrating? Of course. But I find it concerning that they're celebrating the suffering of others, right? So I want to say, like, when I'm celebrating things, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm glad that the decision was made or this law was passed because it protects people from being harassed. It protects people from losing insurance, X, Y, and Z, right? So there's two stories I want to talk about today. In Virginia, we recently see that the Supreme Court released their decision that Democrats cannot redistrict in that state to combat the gerrymandering in states like Texas and other states. And of course, we see in Florida, I think it's Tennessee, after the Supreme Court ruling, Republicans have moved full forward with redistricting to eliminate black voices and Democratic voices in their states. In fact, so much so that there may be no Democratic representation in those states. But somehow that's okay. So if you're a person that stands up for yourself and, for example, the Democrats, and try to combat what Republicans are doing, you're going to have individuals, commentators on CNN and these politicians saying, that's bad, how dare you, while they do the same thing. And then people tell the Democrats, hey, you should not be doing this. You should not be meeting at their level. There needs to be someone that has some decorum, that has some sort of level of responsibility. But why is it that you're blaming the person or people, right, who are combating the bullies, actually standing up and fighting, and not the people who are actually igniting and starting this issue, right? So I find that, this is very disappointing. I think that hopefully I want to take away this. I hope this ignites and puts a fire in many of the electorate to go out and vote. If you did not vote for before, if you've voted for a third-party candidate, I hope this puts you in a position of going, I need to go out and vote. I need to make sure that I'm voting for someone that represents my needs. And for me in this area, I live in upstate New York, 21st District. We have Elise Stefanik vacating her seat, and we have some terrible Republicans. One of them that may win in regards to the Republican primary is Anthony Constantino. And it's interesting to see the debate there that you have the Republicans saying to each other, look, no, that person's a Democrat. And that's the insult. You're trying to insult them that way. And by the way, no, they are not Democrats, because if you look at Anthony Constantino, who's being accused from his opponents as being a Democrat, he's not a Democrat. He's somebody who's aligned with Trump. He has a vote for Trump sign in his business, his huge business. That sign is ginormous, facing the Thruway. And that's somebody that you want to say is a Democrat. You see, like, they're trying to use that as an insult. Before it'll be like, oh, you're racist, you're this. No, now the insult is you're a Democrat. It's really interesting to see, like, how the Republicans, and I'm like, if you're using that as an insult, I think you already know that no sane Democrat would vote for either of you. Especially, Anthony Constantino, just to educate you on local politics here, is somebody that sent letters to the local community about the local schools having, a gay-straight alliance. And I went to one of those schools, and I would have welcomed that. I was in the closet. I was harassed not only by, my peers at times, but also by teachers. So to have a gay-straight alliance, to have a space that was actually accepting, right, to actually give me room to explore myself and be comfortable with myself, right? And who I was and my identity instead of being forced into solitude. That would have been a huge change for me. So not only am I fighting for that Matthew that didn't have that at the time, I'm fighting for the kids now that live in that community who are being attacked and harassed by Anthony Constantino because he wants political points. Because right now, the Republican Party loves to villainize people, trans people, black people, immigrants, Muslim, disabled people, poor people, right? You name it, women, any group that they can, liberals, Democrats, right? Anyone that they can villainize. Meanwhile, what are they doing to help you? Nothing. So, yeah, this decision in Virginia is definitely very disappointing, and it shows that the cards are stacked against the Democrats in combating this Republican assault on our, voting rights and the will of the people and to be able to be heard. So you recently have the Supreme Court decision. I did another video about this, but I now want to go into the backlash, right? You have a lot of people saying, hey, the Supreme Court is corrupt. I'm one of them that believes that. And you have Roberts and Alito responding to this, right? And they're saying that basically they are rejecting the public's opinion. Now, the Supreme Court justices have been, and especially on the conservative side, have been accused of a credibility crisis, being partisan. Roberts says he doesn't think this is accurate, and he believes that the public doesn't understand what they do. Now, he's also indicated, Roberts, that they follow what the law provides. And I think that's important to keep in mind as I go through another point. The court is simply not part of the political process. Now, that's interesting because some people may point out, well, Matthew, they ruled against Trump for the tariffs. Like, obviously. Okay. Now, the court has had issues with accepting gifts. So when it comes to who's funding your pocket and who's the man who's telling you what to do, right, and has that political pressure, I'm going to go with the people that are funding my pockets because I'm a greedy bitch. That's the way I see it. Because I think that any credibility that they have lost in their hypocrisy, right? And we'll get into that a little bit more. So Alito, who's the other person responding, another conservative justice, says that the criticism is trivial at best and baseless and insulting. And he advises that the recent ruling with the Voting Rights Act, stripping Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, is based on the current data and current political conditions, that they have changed since the Civil Rights era. So I'm like, okay. Now, looking at the criticism that this court has is when they were going through their confirmation hearings and not that far in the past, they indicated during the question of precedent, previous decisions that were made by the court. How do you feel about those? Should those be changed? At the time, they indicated, precedent, that's already a decision made by the court, right? And they indicated they would not change those. Now, for me, I understand if a decision is to be changed based on a new law being introduced by Congress, right? The legislative branch. So it makes sense that you're like, well, now this decision changes because people are now, having new cases go to the Supreme Court, and now there's a new law that is going to change and influence this decision. That makes sense. But the law hasn't changed. And according to them, their argument to that is if you say the law hasn't changed, they go, but our understanding of how the Constitution applies to it has evolved. They like to use the word evolved. Now, evolved in the sense of like, I'm getting money, I'm getting some political power here, I'm getting a lot of things in the back end that are influencing my decisions. That's the way I see it, especially when you have Thomas, right, being, accused of taking and not reporting gifts that he's received. I don't think that, to tell you the truth, that a Supreme Court justice should get any gifts of any sort from anyone. You're here to do a job, and you need to be removed of any potential bias that could be interpreted. So accepting gifts, what? No. So I find these statements of like dismissing, right, the public's concerns to be very interesting. It's because I want to go back to one of the quotes that they indicated here. So they say following what the law provides, right? So you see a lot of people say that with the Voting Rights Act, they basically stripped it into being powerless, right? And they are saying, hey, we're just doing what the law provides. But if they were to follow that law, then you would have not ruled the way you did. But according to Alito, the reason why you ruled the way you did is because the environment has changed, right? The political environment. But is that the job of the justices, to look at the current political environment? And you say that you're doing it by not partisan, right? But you're looking at the political environment to make your decisions. And this is where the contradiction, and it doesn't make sense, right? A lot of people are not going to accept it and like go, why are you using that? Like, you're using outside factors outside the law to support your determination. And then you look at the counter argument from the other justices, the dissents, right? The comments. And I think that these conservative justices are going to go like, they're adding fuel to the fire. They're the ones that are putting this in the public's mind that we can't be trusted. The dissents are, no, your actions are. Because then you have a Supreme Court decision that says, hey, ICE can racially profile to determine if somebody's here illegally, but you can't use race in making sure that people have equal representation in their states, right? Especially when they vote differently as a demographic. And then people go, hey, why do you have to make about race? Well, the Supreme Court has, as they kind of stripped affirmative action in college enrollment, right? And when you see, as far as Alito saying like, hey, the political environment has changed, since the civil rights era. Okay, upstate New York, Gloversville, here in upstate New York. 2 instances, Trump's first term and second term of the KKK being prevalent and being known and made to be known in their community. And you see the backlash and racism being present in those communities. So, and I'm not saying the community itself is racist, right? Because there are people in the community who are being harassed and attacked. But when you see the current political environment making it okay for the KKK to come out, I saw another video of someone wearing a Klan robe, and they're walking in the streets. This is the environment that we're in. When you have people okay to racially profile somebody to determine whether or not they should be in the country, when you have a government villainizing people and saying that anytime they're in movies or they're in a position of power that other people deem that they shouldn't be, they can use the terminology of woke and DEI. And to me, these are words that have been kind of taken, abducted by the right, and used to hide the racial slurs that they want to use in these instances because they're upset and don't believe that someone who's a minority should have those positions. And never once do they talk about their credentials. So right now, people are suffering. And regardless of the decision, right? Black Americans have been suffering, and this is just another blow. Like, you're kicking this country while it's down. And I think it's very important that we listen to each other. There are many people who are poor, regardless of race, who are suffering and are naive enough to believe that a lot of these politicians care about them, that they're fighting for them. But if you're spending most of your time talking about a ballroom that you need to protect yourself behind walls because you've made this country unsafe with your rhetoric and hate, how is that helping anybody, right? They're going after trans people. How is that helping anybody? They're cutting health care because they want to fund wars and give more money to rich people, right? And they can't afford it because of the debt. But you're spending so much money where it shouldn't be spent. You're giving contracts to your friends, right? With no bids. And I think that what we need to do as a public is listen to each other, right? Like, if you are somebody who's Black, who feels disenfranchised, who feels that this government is continuously attacking you, look at the evidence, everyone. Look at the evidence. We need to stand up for our fellow Black Americans. We need to stand up for the immigrant community who's being harassed, right? And our country is made up of immigrants. Look at the Statue of Liberty. Look at, that, a symbol to individuals who are coming here for the American dream. And instead, what we're doing is we are allowing this government to put us against each other. So when they look at poor individuals, whether they be white or any other race or creed, they will villainize and say that, look at all the fraud they're committing. Look how lazy they are. They don't want to work. They don't want to do this. And a lot of people believe it. But we don't look at the rich, who are richer than they ever were before, hoarding all the wealth. We don't look at the powerful, who are more powerful than they ever were before, hoarding all the power and control, where our voices don't matter because money matters over our voices. So when I talk about Republicans, Democrats, I'm talking about the leadership. I'm not completely talking about the electorate. Now, if you're someone who completely supports what the Republicans are doing and you go, Matthew, I love that they're targeting immigrants. If you say that, if you love everything that they're doing 100% and you have no regrets and you say, yep, this is 100% what I voted for, then yes, then I will be referring to you. But if you're somebody who's suffering and identifies as a Democrat or a Republican and conservative, right? And you're like, I'm horrified by what's going on. I believe there should be a two-party system where both are reasonable and we have different ideologies, but we can talk at the same table. Okay, that's different. I'm not talking about you, right? I think what's happening is that we're allowing other people to put labels. And even when we identify ourselves in labels, we use that to say like, oh, you're this, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, right? And what that is causing is, as we fight against each other, as we look at this environment, which is more heated and more hateful than it has been in a while. It was hateful before, and there was areas that we were working towards improving. Now we've dug ourselves in a hole. We are completely against each other. We're distracted because the rich and the powerful are getting everything they want right now. They're getting everything they want. And nobody's looking up and realizing that eventually we are going to be useless to them because they've drained us of everything. And our voice will no longer matter. They don't need to listen to us because there's nothing to gain from us anymore. They're like, now you're all in the same boat. We don't care about you. And I hope that people will wake up and realize that. Because if I look at a Democratic politician, they're like, we want to do this and silence these people, and in the sense that they shouldn't be able to have their voice anymore. I'm like, no, I'm not sacrificing a group of people, a minority group, or other people just for a few to benefit. This has to be everyone to benefit. If you're going to introduce a program which is like Medicare for all, it better be Medicare for all. All our minorities in this country, Black Americans, Native Americans, Muslims, disabled community, and women, just to name a few. Of course, the poor individuals, and let's stop villainizing them because they need assistance when they have been taken advantage of so much in this country. I mean, they pay a lot of interest on their loans, more so than anybody else, to get them a very little loan, and they have to pay back so much more over their lifetime than someone else would. So I don't know why we're villainizing the poor and we're falling into this trap. I just really want us to kind of hopefully focus on the fact that, with the Supreme Court justices and their ruling, that when we see like the hypocrisy that they're doing, and we see that Republicans and their hypocrisy, the Republican leadership, will do one thing. Democrats try to combat it, and they're like, don't do that. You can't do what we're doing. That's unfair. And then everyone falls for it. Everyone falls for it. The justification, like when you actually look at it, it falls apart. And I think that what Alito and Roberts and the other conservative justices are failing to understand is that before, when they would say statements like this and make us question ourselves, a lot of the public would go, oh my God, you're right. I don't want to be unreasonable. Maybe I need to rethink this. And now we realized that was a manipulation tactic. That was to take advantage of our empathy, our compassion, and eventually you start to learn the tricks. You're in this relationship, right, with somebody. You go in the relationship, you're like, oh my God, he cares about me. And then he starts neglecting you. And you're like, and he keeps on using your words against you, right? He's gaslighting you. And that's what the Supreme Court's doing. They're gaslighting us. And we're just like, I know what you're doing. As much as you hate wokeness, I am awake to the fact now that your words mean nothing. So, Alito, Roberts, as you say, we reject that. It's baseless. It's insulting. your comments and decisions are insulting. And in fact, you being Supreme Court justices is insulting to this nation. So there's my opinion in regards to that. It's unfortunate in Virginia that, this decision has been made, but I want people who are looking at this decision and saying, what's the point in voting then? That's what they want you to feel. That's what they want you to feel. Do not let other people get into your mind and tell you what you should be doing right now in the sense of like giving up. If somebody's telling you to give up and creating an environment where you feel hopeless, what you need to do is stand up and know that you're not alone. You're not alone right now. I watch so many people suffering and it breaks my heart really a lot. I've looked at my parents of what they've been through. They used to, when I was growing up, they worked in a factory in the 80s and they were pulled aside, even though they are American citizens, born here, right? They're Puerto Rican, like myself. And they were asked by the government whether they were documented and legally here, and they had to prove it. And that's the experience that they went through. And I use that story to empathize with immigrants who have come here, to fight for the American dream, and sometimes can also fall into the trap of trying to think that Democrats or anyone who is fighting for them is the enemy. And you see lots of immigrants being against each other, especially like the Mexican immigrants who've come here and maybe have come here, let's say what Democrats or Republicans will say is illegal, right? And then will become legal citizens and then villainize other people who do the same, which is interesting. They're like, no, I'm different. They're the ones who are criminals. They're not talking about me. I'm a hard worker. They don't care. They don't care. AI is replacing lots of jobs, and, at the same time, they want you to be angry at immigrants taking your jobs, when really the people you should be concerned about is these corporations and the technology companies taking your jobs. So I'm going to leave it there. I have to get back to work. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let's stand together. Let's support each other. If you're feeling down, I understand, but there is hope. All right. Bye.